I'm a lazy ass. My hair looks like shit throughout the whole video. Everything else looks like shit throughout the whole video. I know this. However, it doesn't change the fact that I love Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight's a good game. And I will now proceed to hit the cameraman with this shovel. Bitch, I'm gonna fucking...
We start with the cutscene, setting our background of Shield and Shovel Knight being practically the best adventurers around, until they are finally stopped at the Tower of Fate because Shield Knight took an amulet that corrupts her. Because of this, Shovel Knight went into a life of solitude, until the Knights of No Quarter show up and start reaping havoc everywhere. So, Shovel Knight takes up his shovel again, not only to help the people, but also to save Shield Knight. Now, starting our journey in the plains, we meet Black Knight at the end of the level, and he spouts about the Enchantress and that we can still join her. But our mission is to save Shield Knight by defeating the Enchantress, and no amount of persuasion will keep us from doing so. Defeating him, he retreats, and that's a theme going forward for all the knights. So, moving on, we go to a village, we stock up on meal tickets, talk to some people, play a minigame, and then go fight King Inspector Knight. Each of them leaders of their own domain, giving us a speech of, "The Enchantress gave us power, you can have power too, join us." Or, "My domain, you no enter, sad face," prompting us to defeat them and move on to the next three, Plague, Mole, and Treasure Knight, raffle stomping them as well, unlocking the armor upgrade town, and moving on to the last three knights, Polar, Propeller, and Tinkerer. Now, Polar Knight and Black Knight are special to the story compared to the rest, because in all honesty, the rest of the cast, Shovel Knight could say, "You're a bitch," the fight starts, ends, and then you move on. These two have backstory with Shovel Knight, if that isn't evident enough by one being a Shovel Knight clone, but better, and the other having a giant shovel for a weapon. Black Knight and Shovel Knight both care for Shield Knight, one thinking she's gone to the Enchantress's influence and protecting Enchantress by proxy, and the other doing his damnedest to rescue her. Then for Polar Knight, he's an old comrade of Shovel Knight who tries to get Shovel Knight to join as well because, well, he's an old comrade and friend and doesn't want to fight. But Shovel Knight holds steadfast and does so, defeating him and moving on to the Enchantress's tower, where, in scaling it, we fight Black Knight again, showing him Shovel Knight's conviction to get through is unwavering. Then, we fight all of the Knights of No Quarter again at a dinner table, which I kind of find amusing, and at the last second after defeating all of them, we can choose to save them or not, and I chose to. Unless you can't choose and have to save them, I don't really remember. Anyway, you can talk to them, some of them are whimsical in speaking, and some still think you can't defeat the Enchantress. But regardless, you press on and make your way to her. After a random-ass block stage, you arrive to her location and commence a fortuitous battle. Defeating her reveals Shield Knight and the true form of the Enchantress, and now you have to fight her again in a more infuriating variant, but nonetheless, you defeat her, get slapped by the Enchantress, and Shield Knight stays behind so that Black Knight can rescue you. The tower falls, the people rejoice, and Black Knight carries you back to your campsite and letting you rest, rolling the credits. We see what has happened to the knights after the tower fell and what they're doing now, and one just looks longingly into the distance. After we see what all of them are up to, Shield Knight actually has survived, and has made her way to Shovel Knight's camp and lays down with them resting together. It's nothing revolutionary, and it doesn't have to be. It's an adventure of a knight who wants to save the one he loves, and in doing so also saves the land as well. Nothing more, nothing less. Since Shovel Knight is a 2D side-scrolling platformer that is kind of 8-bit inspired, you spawn in and you realize you don't have a lot to your arsenal yet. You have jumping, slicing, and Link's down air. But later on, you can combine them with relics and upgrades to take advantage of every aspect in every room. But to obtain all that, you have to be mega greedy. Throughout the game, you'll collect a fuck ton of treasure to the point where it makes the Ebony ads that I keep fucking getting blush. You get it from killing enemies, digging up dirts on the floor and walls, digging up blocks of dirt, finding secret areas, and turning in music sheets to the bard in town. All of it in order to buy relics and upgrades to your health, mana, armor, and shovel. However, if you die in this process, yeah, that'll happen. So you have to traverse the level back from a checkpoint that you grabbed to go get your money, but if you die again, you'll lose all of it. Unless, well, you leave the level and go back into it from the prior 2 states. But all of it's in the name of being mega greedy and getting upgrades. Now, health and mana upgrades are self-explanatory, but the real dichotomy of upgrades appears when you upgrade your armor and your shovel. Being from uselessly shiny to getting a mega slice whenever you hit someone with Link's down air twice. But first, in order to get these upgrades, you have to go through a few of the other knights' domains. Each knight and their level have a gimmick. So starting off with the first 2, King and Spectre Knight. Spectre Knight's level introduces you to platforms that you can manage on your own, and the background becoming occasionally entirely black and occasionally also being lit by lightning. King Knight's level, on the other hand, introduces you to combos, where you can go from one enemy to the next, or just having to dodge stuff in general. Other than that, I don't know what else King Knight really does except show new enemies that you can interact with. And as a side note for enemies, most of them are just themed around the level they're in, like moles and lava fish and mole knights, ghosts and skeletons and specter knights, rats and wizards in King Knight's place. The mini bosses or the mini enemy bosses are honest to god piss easy. The dragon, you just use Link's down air combo on him and then hit his head when he's not moving like 3 times. He moves, you hit it again. And then the griffin is just fire wand. Stand here, fire wand. And the lich is also piss easy. Again, it's just Link's down air when he jumps. Hopefully he doesn't jump to the ceiling. Other than that, you can expect mechanics for each level for each of their enemies, like Electric Wind Jellyfish and Propeller Knight's place that I absolutely hate. But all in all, each level has a gimmick. Mole Knights being underground with a bunch of lava and you need to break through a bunch of blocks to get around using the knuckles that you obtain in that level. Then Polar Knight's level with ice, hittable platforms, and giant crevices, as well as a Viking ship. Also the only level that I believe you could soft lock in. I'm not entirely sure about that one. And again, like Treasure Knights, where you're in a giant sub that's also filled with water, but also can control where the water goes, but also is really filled with water in some places and separated by a cave back into the ship. That one's weird, however, each of them have a mechanic to them, and once you get used to them, they're all generally used on the last few levels, except some of them, like the water one, where you can't fill an entire tower with water. But each level also offers a couple of side things, like you can find secret areas, you can find some sheet music to turn in, or you find the secret area for the relic. Also, if you don't find the secret area for the relic for that level, when you go back to town and talk to the relic dude under the town, you go talk to the relic dude and he'll be able to buy the relic that you missed from that level. But generally, that's where a majority of the difficulty comes from. The actual levels themselves and not the bosses. It keeps you on your toes to remember mechanics that you learned at the beginning to carry it through to the end, as well as adding more along the way. Because for me, the most difficult stages were probably Plague and Propeller Knights. I always have a bunch of trouble on them, and sometimes Treasure Knight. Mainly because Propeller Knight has a bunch of fuck off wind, Plague Knight has a bunch of what is going on and why am I getting hit from the sky from these little demons, and Treasure Knight is just gauging how far up I will jump in the water. Because if I jump up too far in Treasure Knight's level, I may or may not hit the spikes. So, a little bit more on dying, you have these checkpoints and you just go right back to one. However, you can also break one of these checkpoints, and when you break it, you get the gem that's advertised inside and a circle of lesser ones. I only recommend doing this if you're confident that you can get through the level without dying again. If not, don't do it. But then if you die again after breaking the checkpoint and you didn't get another one, you'll go back to the prior one before the one you destroyed. But to me, it's a good risk and reward system, gauging if you really want to get more money to go buy those relics, or if you want to play it safe because you know you have enough from all the exorbitant amounts that the game already gives you. Because buying relics are generally specific to the level that they're in and don't technically get used outside of their own level. Like the Phase Locket in Spectre Knights. Use it to go invincible for a couple of seconds to do some of the mechanics in there. Or the Fire Wand in King Knight's place. And so on and so forth. To me, the only really notable ones are the Fire Wand, the Knuckles, and the Propeller Dagger. So for better clarification, what I actually meant was, there's items like the coin, the ball and chain, and the anchor. Generally, you will rarely, if ever, use them outside of the levels you obtain them in. However, items like the Fire Wand and Phase Locket, you'll use them in the levels you're in, or you obtain them in, a lot. However, they're used a lot outside of their own levels as well. That's what I meant. I don't know what the fuck I was saying here, but these videos are scripted, and I hate myself. Anyway, moving on. For me, my bread and butter is the Fire Wand. It allows me to get extra damage off after hitting an enemy and they run away for a little bit to do like their next attack or their next phase. Not only that, it allows me easy kills and easy damage in the levels themselves. Next is the Knuckle Daggers, giving me momentum through breaking blocks just in case something happens, or I can panic use them sometimes to break through blocks and just get extra money. And then lastly is the Propeller Dagger, because it just allows me to zoom through levels and skip some things or cheese some things that I shouldn't be able to cheese, but I can and did. Now here's a tier list that I made. Do not take it super seriously because obviously some can raise and lower. I made it in about 5 minutes, but this is what I think about all the items in the game as well, because I don't think that Triple Chalices are a relic. They're more of a potion that you get from the Triple King, where it's one just gives you invincibility for 10 seconds, one just restores your health and mana, and one sucks in all the treasure around you like you are a vacuum or you're just Kirby. So to me, they're more of just a consumable that helps you in that certain time, not really a relic. Speaking of mana, all of the relics require mana to use. The Phase Locket requires 12 and the Propeller Dagger requires 4. However, mana is extremely plentiful in this game. You will not find a screen where there is no mana or an enemy or a little side location, making everything pretty much spammable to the point where you can kind of just abuse the relics in this game, but at the same time, you don't really need them to beat the game or the level for that matter. However, it all accumulates into traversing the levels using either just you and your shovel or everything and going ham. Now after traversing the knight's level, you reach their chamber where you'll engage in dialogue, then commence with a fight. However, again, as stated earlier, Shovel Knight really could just say, "You're a bitch," kill them, and move on. But the actual fight is where it's at. Each knight using the concepts that you learned in the level as mechanics for their boss battle. They also pull a little sneaky and add some new mechanics in there as well. Mole Knight sending blocks at you, you can use your knuckles to go through them, get momentum, and go to them, which I didn't do. Treasure Knight using moves that fill up the entire screen, but you remember you're in water, so you can use the momentum of the water to jump over them. And then Black Knight, who's our humanoid boss copy, and honestly probably is one of the most enjoyable to fight in this game. However, that is subjective. But to me, he is super satisfying to fight, mainly just because he's a literal copy of us with like 2 extra things. Until later, but we'll get to that. It's just something about humanoid copies of us as bosses in games just does it for me. It's like the game and the developers are testing us as like, do you know all the mechanics of you? Do you know all that we've given you for you? Now fight you again. You versus you. Spider-Man. And here, he's no exception. He uses links down air in succession, and if you know the hitboxes or just how fast it is and he's falling with it, you can counter him pretty easily with a regular hit or charged one if you want. And technically his projectile is different, where he goes from the complete right side of the screen, he charges up and then sends it at us. We also have a projectile in an upgrade where we just send it at the ground, only when we're at full health though. Not gonna lie, not one of the best ones though. However, he is essentially a copy of us. Until later, where he gains wings and a
Mega fuck you meteor.
And in all honesty, it's kind of a meh boss fight at that point, because he's not our copy anymore, and his upgraded moves are kind of slightly annoying to deal with, especially the fuck off meteor and how he just leaves the screen then comes back. However, other bosses do leave the screen, so I'll give him that caveat. Is that word correctly? Caveat? I did not use the word caveat correctly. I just looked it up. Regardless, it's still slightly less enjoyable to fight him and more of a please let me move on. And when we move on, we get to the boss rush mode, where it's a nice test to see if you still remember mechanics and if your skills are up to date. And after all of that, we get to the final battle against a very okay boss. And I think it's okay because the Enchantress is okay as a boss. Her first phase is essentially fine. It's just hit her when she's able to attack, she'll dive at you, throw a couple balls, and then take away the platform you're on. But her second phase is not my favorite. And it's not because of the boss itself, it's because of Shield Knight, actually. So, Shield Knight is very weird when it comes to fighting this boss, because, like, just with the way Shield Knight works. Because when the Enchantress is using her giant ball attack, and Shield Knight goes up to block it, it's kind of confusing where the balls are going to land, if they're going to land below her to a degree, or do I have to stand back more, or do I have to just be right behind her? I don't know if that's just me being confused, the pixel graphics, or just the way Shield Knight works, but more often than not, I'm getting hit by that move even if Shield Knight's blocking it. Sometimes Shield Knight will boost you up to go attack the Enchantress. However, it's not enough sometimes, but then sometimes it's the perfect amount. It's very confusing. And then sometimes it'll just be way too far away before she does it again. So you're just running at her, she'll be using it, you go up to do your down air, and then she stops. Or you hit it as she's falling so you don't get enough momentum to go up anyway. So it's not really a problem with the boss herself, it's more a problem with the mechanic needed to attack the boss, aka Shield Knight. However, when I was actually able to attack the Enchantress, I used the propeller dagger to get closer to her after 3 hits that she would run away from. Mainly to try and hit her again so I didn't have to deal with Shield Knight and worry about dying because Shield Knight was being weird. So I mainly just did that. Sometimes it worked, sometimes I got 2-3 hits off. Majority of the time I tried and I survived a mechanic, but overall it's an okay fight. It's not anything to write home about. In the end, I only died about 30 times, and here is a tier list for all the bosses. From, I think I did this to least enjoyable to most enjoyable, evident by Propeller Knight being the lowest, and then we have Enchantress right after that. However, you might be asking, who are these for that aren't a knight? Also weren't appearing in the main story at all because I didn't show the footage. Well, so there's not a lot of side content in this game per se. You just have to make your own. But in all honesty, it's just a few items. You've got 5 optional bosses, side areas that test your knowledge with your relics, a bottle hitting minigame, and collecting everything in the game? Oh, and Challenge of Heroes, which is just a haunted house. You don't have to do any of the side content to beat the game. They just ensure or exceed the amount of treasure that you need to buy anything. The relic side missions give you a lot of gold that you can use to buy a lot of other things. So to me, it was highly beneficial to go do all of that, so I had a lot of extra money left over. It's kind of optional content like this that I love, where you don't need to do it, but it's just fun to do it regardless, and it rewards you for doing it. Because I wanted to get more treasure to buy those upgrades, so I did it. I wanted to test my knowledge with the relics to also get treasure and buy more upgrades. And mainly because the game's just fun. Overall, it's not a long game. It's not a long game on release. I clocked in about 3 hours and 42 minutes. And after the release of Shovel Knight, they released 3 more stories. So, they also rebranded Shovel Knight as Shovel Knight Treasure Trove and Shovel Knight Shovel of Hope. And they released all of them in varying years. Shovel Knight in 2014, Plague Knight in 2015, Spectre Knight in 2017, and then finally King Knight's Story in 2019. So now, yes, it's Shovel Knight's Treasure Trove, including all 4. Maybe when you buy it, I bought it a while ago and then it just updated and I got all of them for free, so I don't know, do not quote me on this. But it's not long, but I'm going to go through each of them one by one. I wish it was a bit longer, but it was a Kickstarter game, if I recall correctly. But really, that's all I can ask for. And it was a fun, 2D, 8-bit inspired game that brought me back to my Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver days. Because I didn't own an SNES. And I still don't. As much as I want to. Because I want to play Castlevania Symphony of the Night. My alarm is going off and I'm going to dismiss it right now and continue the bit. Because that is what I'm going to do. And play Castlevania Symphony of the Night. What is a man? I think that was the right game. I don't think that was the right game. I'm probably just really fucking stupid. Still, it's a great game, and I think it deserves a sequel. Also, the soundtrack is a banger. But finally, if you've watched this far, thank you. I appreciate it. I will try to be more consistent in the future. However, this game is really good. I recommend anyone who sees this to buy it and play it. I've also started streaming, and I'm going to do that every Monday, Tuesday, and sometimes on Friday. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. Have a good one, and be well.